Hi, and welcome to the demo for the watercolor practice for the Organics Connections project. To get started, you will need this watercolor project practice worksheet, the nature handout, and the organic shapes handout. You will also need a watercolor paint set, fine liners, and a watercolor palette. You will also need watercolor brushes of various sizes, a cup for water, and color pencils. You will also need a pencil for sketching, and you can grab some shapes like circles to trace. Let's get started at the top of the worksheet with color pencil practice. We're going to start by adding some watercolor. You can approach this however you like. Just try using a variety of different techniques. I'm going to start by putting down a wash first, and then I'm going to go ahead and drip some other colors into that. This is called wet and wet. And don't forget that you do have to give it time to dry if you do not want your colors to bleed together. While this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and do the fine liner practice. Our goal is to practice neat penmanship. Create 4 different line patterns. Now that the first part is dry, let's go ahead and add a background. First, I am adding water to the background in the places I want the paint to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some color in those areas I added the water. And while it's still wet, I'm going to add some different colors in. Again, this is called wet into wet. To prevent things from bleeding out of control, I need to let this dry before I add in more layers. If you are limited on time, you can always use a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. Okay, while that's drying, we're going to go ahead and practice our limited color palette. Practice 4 different color combinations. Choose a set of 3 colors. Notice how I have a paper towel nearby to blotch up any mistakes that I make. Which color combination is your favorite? Okay, it looks like our worksheet is all dry, so we're going to go ahead and go back up to the top and work on those color pencils. Choose colors that work well with the watercolors that you used. Add colored pencils to the areas to enhance the shapes. And work in small, tight circles for a smooth transition. Okay, now that we have finished the first 3 sections, let's go ahead and start on the final watercolor sketch. Practice your composition before starting on the final paper. For this, we're going to be using 3 different mediums: watercolor, color pencil, and a fine liner. Start with a background. Use a variety of different techniques, and make sure to let those layers dry. I am creating a wash of wet into wet. This is not watercolor paper, so the paint absorbs differently. I suggest using less water on this so that your paper doesn't get blotchy. With wet into wet, the paint does bleed. You do have some control of where the color goes. And before we do anything else, we let that dry. Okay, once it's dry, go ahead and add some additional layers. Here I'm splattering paint. And once again, I'm going to let that dry. Once this is dry, it is time to draw. Don't forget about those handouts that we talked about in the beginning. Draw lightly because you will be able to see your pencil marks through the watercolor. I would even lightly erase right before starting watercolor. For this, we want to include 5 organic shapes and 3 elements from nature. And once your drawing is complete, go ahead and start to add in some watercolor. And don't forget, we're going to be adding a lot of layers, so give yourself time to let this dry. And then, of course, once it's dry, add some more layers. Let this dry, and now we can add some color pencils on top. Remember to keep clean edges and color in small, tight circles for a smooth transition. And once you're done with your color pencils, we are ready to start our last layer, which will be the fine liner. Remember to try to be as neat as possible and get creative with the different patterns you add. and trace everything for an interesting, creative, original look. And don't forget about those line patterns. I wasn't super happy about this paper that I was working on, so I tried it again on a piece of watercolor paper. Notice the difference in colors. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching.